In the world of royalty, every jewel carries a story, and every crown holds a memory. Few pieces of royal treasure or as powerful as Diana's famous tiara, a symbol of elegance, sorrow, and strength that captured the hearts of millions. When Camilla attempted to claim that crown for herself, she walked straight into a storm she could never control. Guards stood from the legacy stood taller, and humiliation followed swiftly. This was not about diamonds or gold. It was about memory, loyalty, and the eternal struggle between image and truth. And this time the crown refused to bend. The symbol of a crown long before became a source of contention. The tiara had already carved its place in history. It glittered under the palace lights, yet its shine carried far more than the brilliance of diamonds. For many who had seen it rest upon the head of Diana, it was not simply an ornament. It was a story told in silver and stone. It was resilience carved into every curve. It was beauty framed in light, and it was heartbreak hidden beneath every sparkle. The tiara was formerly known by its title in the royal collection, but to the public it would forever be Diana's crown. They remembered it from photographs and gallows when she seemed untouchable and radiant. They remembered it from her names where she smiled, though her eyes told another tale. The piece became more than royal jewelry. It became an emblem of her presence. Wherever Diana wore it, she seemed to hold the gaze of the entire world. For the public, the tiara was memory. It reminded them of her laughter, her warmth, and the way she reached out to people beyond palace. It reminded them that she was both a princess and a woman who longed for something simpler. The sparkle of the jewels became tied to the sparkle of her spirit. When she passed, it became a symbol no heirloom could replace. It became an heirloom of love for the family. The tiara was history. It carried the weight of tradition. It had once been passed between generations, but after Diana it no longer felt like an accessory of the crown. It felt like a relic of her life and her suffering. William and Harry knew this more deeply than anyone. For them, the side of the tiara was like the echo of her voice. It was a reminder of her stuff, length, and her vulnerability. It was a reminder that behind every jewel lay a mother's sacrifice. When it was locked away after her passing, the tiara did not lose its power. If anything, it grew stronger. Time only deepened its meaning. The case that held it became almost sacred. Visitors and officials who glimpsed it knew they were not looking at mere diamonds. They were looking at a memory preserved in stone. They were looking at a symbol of love tested by fire. The tiara remained untouched because it carried something too delicate to be worn again. It was no longer just the property of the crowd. It was a piece of Diana herself. Every sparkle seemed to whisper her story. Every angle reflected her shadow. To wear it again would not be like wearing any other jewel. It would be like carrying the memory of a woman whose life still defined the family. And so the tiara awaited not as a trinket, not as a crown, but as a mirror of resilience, beauty, and heartbreak. A symbol that belonged as much to the people who loved her as it did to the sons who remembered her. It was more than history. It was Diana Camilla private desire. Camilla had lived for years under the gaze of a public that refused to forgive. To some, she would always be the outsider. To others, she was the shadow that had darkened Diana's life. No matter how carefully she smiled or how dutifully she stood beside Charles, she felt the invisible wall that separated her from true acceptance. She had worn gowns and jewels from the collection, yet none of them silenced the whispers, none of them made her feel as though she truly belonged. The tiara sat locked away, untouchable, yet always present in her thoughts. It was not greed that drew her to it. It was not malice either. It was the longing for legitimacy in her heart. She believed to wear that tiara was to be absorbed fully into history, to no longer be seen as the intruder who had taken her place by Charles's side, but as the woman acknowledged by the crown itself. Camilla had watched Diana once years before wearing the tiara at a state banquet. She remembered the way the diamond seemed to halo her face, the way the world seemed to soften around her presence. It was not only beauty that radiated from Diana that evening, it was recognition. Everyone in that room knew she belonged to history, and that moment Camilla longed for that same acknowledgement, not as competition with Diana, but as proof that she had stepped out of the shadows. Her private desire was over-voiced in public. She would never dare say it aloud in a room filled with advisors, or to Charles himself. It would sound too petty, too self-serving, and she knew it would awaken the fury of William and Harry. Yet in her private moments, sitting before the mirror, she imagined it, the cold sparkle resting on her own head, the headlines declaring her queen consort, not as the woman who replaced, but as the woman who arrived in her mind. It was more than jewelry. It was a key to a door. She had never been allowed to walk through a door that led to legitimacy, to a place in the narrative of the monarchy that did not feel like eggs. All she told herself, it was not about taking Diana's memory, but about merging into it, stepping into the stream of history that would continue long after her. But beneath his desire lay something she could not shake. She knew the world would never see her as she saw herself. They would see only the comparison. They would see Diana's shadow in every jewel, in every gesture. The tiara was not just a crown, it was a mirror that would reflect back the pain of the past. And yet Camilla still wanted it, not as a triumph, but as a balm for the ache of never belonging. Her longing grew in silence, fed not by pride, but by the simple human yearning to be recognized, to no longer live forever as the outsider. She dreamed of the tiara, not because it was Diana's, but because it represented a place she had sought all her life, a place within the story, a place where she might finally feel accepted, the guarded legacy. The morning had been planned with quiet precision. Camilla had decided to make her request in a manner that appeared ordinary, as though she was simply asking for a piece of the royal collection to be prepared for an upcoming occasion. She spoke with the calm tone of a woman who had long learned how to mask her true feelings, yet inside her heart quickened. This was not just another jewel, this was the crown she had imagined for years, the one that could close the distance between her and acceptance. The request was delivered through the usual channels, a word to an aide, a note passed to the royal jewel custodian. Camilla thought that perhaps if she spoke softly, if she treated it as a matter of routine, it might slip into approval without resistance. But the walls of the palace remembered. They remembered the vow William and Harry had made. They remembered the instruction that Diana's tiara was not to be treated as a circulating piece of regalia, but as a legacy preserved untouched. When the guards arrived to escort her to the jewel room, she thought the matter was settled. She walked with careful grace, rehearsing in her mind the image of herself standing before the mirror, the tiara resting upon her head. Yet when the door opened and the polished case stood before her, something unexpected happened. The guards did not step aside and stay. they remained firmly in place, their bodies forming a barrier between her and the glass. "Your request cannot be granted, ma'am," one of them said with a tone of respect, but also with unshakable firmness. "This piece is secured under protocol as part of the personal legacy of the late Princess Diana. It is not available for cons." George used the word struck her like a blow. She had expected hesitation, perhaps even quiet disapproval, but not outright denial. She felt the color rise in her cheeks as she realized she was not only being refused, but refused in a way that carried the sting of public humiliation, even though the room was empty. So, save for the guards, she knew word of this moment would find its way through the palace corridors, whispered in the voices of attendants and staff. Camilla stood still, her hands tightening against her gown. She wanted to argue, to insist, but the impenetrable stance of the guards told her that no argument would matter. The tiara was not theirs to release. It had been sealed in memory, protected not just by glass and loss, but by the weight of Diane, his name, and the unyielding will have her sons. She turned slowly, her pride and her longing colliding within her. To walk away felt like retreat, yet there was no victory to claim behind her. That here gleamed in the case, cold and untouchable, its light sharp as judgment. It was not merely a crowd, it was a guarded legacy preserved as a mother's gift to her sons. For Camilla, the rejection was more than denial. It was a reminder that no matter her title, there were places within the royal story where she would never belong. Williams from stand. The refusal of the guards did not end the matter. Whispers traveled quickly through the palace halls, weaving their way into conversations that were not meant to be overheard. It was only a matter of time before William learned of Camilla's request. When he did, he felt the familiar ache in his chest, the kind of pain that came whenever his mother's name or memory was stirred by controversy. He did not hesitate. He sought Camilla directly, his voice steady, but charged with emotion that no crown could silence. "I know what you ask for," Williams said, his eyes fixed on, all with the same unyielding strength that had carried countless storms. "You wanted the tiara, my mother's tiara." Camilla looked away for a moment, her composure faltering. "I thought," she began carefully, "that it might finally be time that it could be worn again, not locked away forever." William's reply came quickly, sharp, but not shouted. "It will not be worn again. Not by you, not by anyone. That tiara does not belong to the institution, it does not belong to the crown. It belongs to her memory, to the woman who bore the weight of all of this." While the world watched her break, his voice thickened as he spoke, his words carrying both fury and grief. "That piece of jewelry is more than diamonds and silver. It is the last fragment of dignity, my brother, and I can protect for her. The world took her life, the press devoured her privacy, and this family often failed to shield her when she needed it most. I will not let her legacy be dressed upon another as though she were a chapter easily replaced." Camilla, low lips pressed tightly together. She wanted to defend herself, to say she meant no harm, but the force of William's conviction pinned her in silence. "You may wear crowns," he continued. "You may sit at the side of my father, and you may hold the title that comes with the throne, but this tiara is not yours to claim. It is not the crown, and to offer it is hers forever, and it will stay untouched." because to wear it again would not be honor, it would be eraser. The words rang through the room with the weight of finality. William was not speaking only to Camilla, but to the history that lingered like a shadow over every royal duty. He was speaking as a son now. As a prince, he was speaking as a man who still carried the memory of walking behind his mother's coffin, who still felt the burn of cameras in his eyes, who still remembered her tears echoing through the palace halls. Camilla lowered her gaze, unable to meet the fire in his eyes. She understood then that this was not a request she could make again. The tiara was untouchable, not because of protocol, but because William's vow was stronger than any tradition in that moment. His stand was clear. Diana's memory would not be overshadowed, not by the crown, not by history, and certainly not by Camilla. Camilla, his wounded pride. The room emptied, but Camilla remained seated, her hands gripping the armrest as though letting go would expose the weakness. She fought so hard to hide the sting of William's words still echoed in her ears, every syllable a reminder that no matter how far she had come, she would always stand and die in a shadow. It was not simply the denial of the tiara, it was what the didn't. Nile represented a wall between her and the family she had fought for decades to stand beside. For years, Camilla had endured whispers, headlines, and silent stares. She had told herself that survival required resilience, that with time she would be seen as legitimate, not as the outsider who arrived after tragedy, but as the woman who helped steady the future king. She had believed that titles and crowns would eventually secure her place, yet in this moment, she felt those illusions crumble. If Diana's tiara was untouchable, then perhaps acceptance itself was untouchable as well, or pride burned hot within her. She had learned to carry herself with dignity, to raise her chin when others lowered their eyes, to stand tall, even when she felt small inside. But William's rejection was different. It was not whispered gossip or the judgment of strangers. It was the voice of the son whose approval she needed most, the one who could never look at her without remembering what had been lost to him. She would never be more than a mind or of pain. Camilla vulnerability rose, with the weight of her pride colliding like two storms within her chest. She wanted to lash out, to declare that she had endured her own share of humiliation. Better life had not been untouched by sorrow, but she knew that our words would never match the gravity of Diana's legacy. She could never claim the same place in history. No matter how much she gave to the role. In the quiet of that moment, she remembered her long years in silence, watching from the sidelines as Diana commanded the affection of the world. She remembered her own life marked by secrecy, by stolen moments, but love that was judged before it was understood. He remembered how she had once believed that standing beside Charles at last would end the whispers, yet now she realized whispers did not end, they only changed shape. The refusal of the tiara was not simply about a jewel, it was about belonging, and in being denied, Camilla felt the truth settle upon her like cold stone. She could sit upon the throne, she could wear the regalia of queens, but there would always be places she could not enter. Diana's memory was one of them. It was a door locked forever, and the key had been buried with her. Camilla lowered her head, all pride bruised. In her heart wrong, she had dreamed of recognition, of acceptance, of being seen as more than the outsider. But this moment exposed the cracks in her place at the throne side. Titles could not erase shadows, and crowns could not mend what history had broken Harry's perspective. The palace had not yet settled from the clash. When Harry entered the room, his presence was quieter than William's, but no less weighted with emotion. He had heard the murmurs, seen the tension, and he understood that Diana's tiara was at the heart of it. For a moment he studied the faces before him. William still carried fire in his eyes. Camilla looked bruised, though she tried to hide it, and Charles stood in the background, as if the walls themselves were pressing down upon him. Harry broke the silence with words that did not strike like William's did, but carried a different kind of gravity. "I agree with my brother," he said firmly. "The tiara cannot be worn again. It is not just jewelry. It is a symbol of Mom. It belongs to her memory, and no one can replace that." Camilla flinched at the bluntness, but Harry's voice softened as he continued, "Yet I also see something else. I see how this family clings to symbols as though they are life itself. Crowns, gowns, palaces, photographs, we let them define us. We hold them up to the world as proof of who we are. But sometimes they become chains, sometimes they bury what is human beneath what is royal." His words unsettled the room. William shifted slightly, his jaw tightening. Though he did not interrupt, Harry went on, his voice steady, each word carrying the truth of his own lived pain. "I know what it is like to be trapped in an image, to smile for cameras when inside you are breaking, to bow, to wave, to act the part, while no one asks how you are surviving." Symbols can inspire the world, but they can also suffocate the people forced to carry them. He looked at Camilla directly. "Is it depression?" Not accusing, but searching. "I understand your need to be recognized, to want to belong, to feel that the years of whispers and headlines and judgment do not define you forever. I understand that. But you must see what this tiara means to us. It is not projection of you as a person, it is protection of her as our mother." Camilla, his lips parted, but she found no words. Harry's gaze softened further. "And maybe that is the curse of this family, that our memories in our grief, for never just ours, they are always tied to the institution, to the image, to the story the world wants to believe." William finally spoke, his voice lower now. "He is right, symbols matter, but they are not life for us. This one cannot be touched, not now, not ever." Harry gave a small nod, his eyes glistening with the weight of his own memories. The tiara would remain locked, but the conversation had unlocked something else: the truth that the monarchy lived on symbols while its people carried wounds, and the reminder that behind every crown lay chains that only love could break. The public mirror. The palace had hoped to contain the matter within its walls, but whispers have a way of slipping through cracks no guard can seal. Within days the story reached the press, first as a quiet rumor, and then as a roaring headline. Camilla, blocked from Diana's tiara, blazed across front pages. Every photograph of the tiara resurfaced. Every image of Diana wearing it was printed anew, and every opinion found its way into the endless storm of commentary. The public reaction was immediate and fierce. For some it was vindication. They saw the tiara as sacred, untouchable, a relic of the princess who had given them hope beyond the palace gates. These voices argued with fiery devotion that William and Harry were right to guard it, that allowing Camilla to wear it would have been an insult to Diana's memory. Social media flooded with old pictures of Diana, her smile radiant, her eyes luminous beneath the crown that had now become more than an heirloom. It was a symbol of love preserved, served of dignity defended, yet others spoke with sympathy for Camilla. They saw in her refusal not only protection of Diana's legacy, but cruelty toward a woman who had lived her life in shadows and scorn. They wrote columns questioning whether forgiveness had truly been denied. They argued that symbols should not be prisons, and that perhaps allowing Camilla to wear the tiara would have been a gesture of reconciliation. Debate raged in households and coffee shops, across television screens and radio stations. The tiara became a mirror reflecting not only the wounds of the royal family, but also the wounds of society itself. People projected their own experiences of betrayal, loyalty, grief, and forgiveness onto the diamonds. Some saw Diana as the eternal martyr, others saw Camilla as a survivor of public hatred. The arguments were never just about a crown, they were about memory, justice, and what it means to protect or to forgive. Commentators spoke of the monarchy's obsession with image. Some declared that this was proof the institution still lived in Diana's shadow. Others argue that it showed strength, that even royalty must honor the boundaries of personal grief through it. All the tiara gleamed in photographs like a silent witness carrying the weight of stories far beyond the walls where it was kept. Within the palace, the family felt the storm grow heavier.